Well, hello there. Welcome back. I had all these grand plans of doing a whole bunch of podcast episodes over the holidays. And as you can probably tell, it never happened. What did happen? December 29th, I started getting sick and I spent about 5 days in bed, sleeping day and night. The recovery has been slow, but I'm on the mend, finally. It was a very intense Christmas and New Year period. Lots of stuff happened, lots of intense stuff. But here I am. I am here. So a couple of things happened. I released a course called RECLAMATION on December 28th. And that was a fun process. You know, it's interesting. When I left NXIVM, I threw everything out. And many of you heard this. I threw everything out, all the training, all the everything. Not only NXIVM, everything before. I just threw all personal growth out completely. But I recognized over the years that there are certain things that I didn't know, even before NXIVM, that I was working on, was aware of, had studied, that I realized were valuable. And so bit by bit, I've been adding things back into my life that I threw away. And that's one of the things, for people that have been in cults, you probably know this. When you leave whatever it is, whatever the high control group is, you just usually throw everything out. And the problem is there's good stuff that you throw out as well that you no longer have access to, but you're so traumatized, you just don't want to look at it. You don't want to deal with it, which I completely understand. So I think about the point now where I began to add some of those things back in. And I recognize that there were certain things I've done over the last few years that are very, very valuable. They've helped me. And I wanted to share those with other people. So for those of you that are still interested in RECLAMATION, I'll put the link below for the course. The other thing I wanted to say is that this podcast is made possible because of the generosity of my Patreon supporters. They're incredible people, some really remarkable people who have been through a lot of stuff themselves. And I want to thank them again for all their support. And if you'd like to become a Patreon supporter, please go to patreon.com/Mark Vicente and sign up there. I would really appreciate it. There were a few questions that came up during some of the AMAs I did right before Christmas, and I answered a bunch of them on Instagram. But I thought there were a few I thought it would be interesting to just expand a little bit on those. And one of the questions, somebody asked me on Instagram on an AMA, what were the key moments that opened your eyes? And I think they mean opened my eyes to NXIVM. And it's interesting, there are so many little different moments. And one of the things I will say in answer is that there's this building dam of potential evidence that builds up as you start realizing something is wrong. But you don't connect the dots for quite a while necessarily. So there's all these questions waiting to be answered. And of course, you can't properly answer the questions because to properly answer the questions you're having, which are doubts, you're going to have to question the cult leader. And you don't want to do that. So they're all waiting for you, you know. And so for me, just in answer to this question, and I've mentioned this before on numerous podcasts and things, but when I began having suicidal ideation, that's when I realized something dreadful was wrong. But I think the beginning of the dam breaking was when and those of you that have watched The Vow, when you hear me talking to Raniere, those recorded conversations on the phone, you can hear me asking questions and he's being very evasive. And I realized during one of the phone conversations, that he was lying to me. And that really was the beginning of everything beginning to unravel and me starting to go like, wait a minute. So if he lied about that, what else is he lying about? And that was a crucial crack in the dam. There were other things as well. I think some of you know that Bonnie was putting in front of me a lot of stuff to watch and to read. One of the things was this movie, Holy Hell, made by my incredible friend Will Allen. Holy Hell blew my mind because I was watching Holy Hell and I was watching, for those of you that have seen it, you know what I mean. For those of you who haven't, the cult leader puts on these big events maybe once a year where he's a ballet dancer apparently, and he's doing ballet, this big event that's only for the people in the organization. And as I watched that, I thought, holy shit, this is just like V-Week. And there were further cracks like, wait, this happens in other groups as well? Like there's this one performance just for the cult leader and that's it, and nobody ever gets to see it again. There were also articles. There was an article on spiritual narcissism that a defector who was defecting very quietly posted on social media, and she got shit for it immediately. And I think because she got shit for it, I was so interested in it. I wanted to read more. And then I think the big article that Bonnie put in front of me was by Shahida Arabi. And it was called 20 Diversion Tactics Highly Manipulative Narcissists, Sociopaths, and Psychopaths Use to Silence You. And some of you may know that Bonnie put this article in front of me. I read the article and she said to me, read this article before you have any more conversations with Keith Raniere. And I did need to have a phone call with him. So I read the article. It was incredible. And then I had a phone conversation with him. And during the phone conversation, as I was asking him questions, he did pretty much every single one of these tactics. And when I hung the phone up, I went back to Bonnie and I said, holy shit, he pretty much did all of them. And in my mind, I knew that was my last conversation with him ever. And it actually was. So I think there's not one single moment. I think it's a series of moments, but I think what happens is you've built up all these questions, and then when there's enough questions to put so much pressure and something happens, and in this case it was, oh, holy shit, he's lying to me, that was the crack that began everything. And then, of course, I had immense support from Bonnie, and I also had an exit counselor, a cult exit counselor that was like instrumental. I'm actually going to try and see if I can get her on to my podcast and talk through a lot of the things we spoke about, because she was very, very wise. Another question that came up in the AMA was, does a cult leader learn as they go along or research before? That's interesting. I think it's a bit of both, but I think the important thing to understand, for those of you that have been in narcissistically abusive relationships, be it romantic or be it, in a family situation, you've probably noticed that it's like they're all cut from the same cloth. It's like they go to the same school to learn their shit. And it's not that. It's that they have the same pathology. They have this enormous need for attention and fuel. And they're very hypersensitive. So they all have the same behaviors. And what they want is absolute obedience and control. So in essence, they behave the same because they are the same. They have the same pathology. So that's one thing. They all do the same thing in the end. They just do it in different contexts. And what they're looking for is they're looking for environments where they can get maximum control, maximum fuel, maximum adoration. So they will find those environments. And the best place to find those environments are people who naturally want to believe in something. Now, that's not a bad thing. People naturally want to believe in goodness. And so they see this, and they don't know what goodness is, but they see that everybody likes it and wants it and seems very moved because they have this weird water that comes out of their eyes when they talk about this thing. They don't know what it's like to have weird water coming out of their eyes, i.e. crying or moved to tears. So they find these environments, and then they capitalize on the people's yearning for goodness, for a better world, for whatever it is. And the targets of their control have never studied these people, have never studied their pathology, so they have no idea what they're looking at. So we believe in goodness or believe in whatever. We don't know that we're dealing with somebody that has no conscience whatsoever. But in specifically answering your question, I think that they do a bit of both. I think they learn as they go along. I think sometimes cult leaders will maybe they do too much punishment and they get like the beginning of what looks like a revolt. So then they switch tactics, like good cop, bad cop kind of thing. But I do think that a lot of them research very carefully. They research the environments that will give them, as I said, the maximum amount of fuel. And of course, religious environments are like prime. I spoke to somebody recently, who's a big climate activist, and they were heartbroken when they found out that the carbon trading system and scheme that's being used and implemented in various countries was actually designed by the oil companies. And they didn't know that. I did know that. And so what was horrifying to them was that the very people that they were fighting are the very people that designed a scheme to try to save the world. And I said, yeah, well, that's what they do. Look at NGOs, look at charities, look at a lot of big movements in the world. Many of these have at the top these malevolent personalities that have recognized, oh, these people want this thing. They want to, save the world, or, it's climate change, or it's animal rights, or it's whatever it is. And they then work their way into that system, and they utilize these people's goodwill against them. It's deeply, deeply sad, but it is what they do. So they're constantly looking for these kinds of environments. So what happens is they get into an environment like this, but then they have to learn the ropes. So I think, in answer to your question, do they learn as they go along? Yes, they do. Do they research before? I think they do that as well. In the case of Raniere, he was researching, he was studying Scientology, he was studying NLP. He also went to some ashrams. And the reports I have from people that were around when he was younger was he was kicked out of one particular ashram. And I think it's because he was trying to, diddle a woman, which is pretty common with him. And I think that he saw what the guru was getting and realized he wanted that. So I think that's what they do. They kind of research, where's the place that I can get the most fuel, and that's what I'm going to go for. So I think it's both. Another thing that popped up, I post stuff on social media. I think a lot of you know that. And I posted something recently, sort of a meme, I guess, or a quote that I made up, which is, it says basically, them, I can't believe you were in a cult. Me, looking at all the stuff they're buying into and thinking to myself, should I tell them? Now, the reason I posted that was because, believe it or not, I still do get shit from people about being in a cult. And then I sometimes will look at, okay, what do they believe in? Like, what are the things they post next to their names, And I go, wow, so they're in one too, and they don't know it. And it's ironic because, of course, if I were to say to them, I think you're in a cult, they would freak out and they would rage at me, which is usually the sign that they're in some kind of, unhealthy ideology, or they have an unhealthy approach to the ideology they believe in. There's an amazing woman, Dr. Christine Louis de Cannonville, who I've done some work with, and she wrote back to me on Facebook in response to that particular quote, and I thought it was very interesting. I want to read it to you. She said, not everybody understands what a cult mentality looks like, and those that do often think it would never happen to me. But that is a fallacy. The belief that one is immune to falling into a cult mentality, also known as malignant narcissism, can stem from a lack of understanding of how cults operate. This misconception is often fueled by the idea that only certain types of people are susceptible to cult influence. However, research and experts in the field suggest the susceptibility to cults is not determined by intelligence, personality, or other individual traits. Instead, various factors such as the social and psychological dynamics within a cult, the techniques used for persuasion, and the vulnerability of individuals at a given time can contribute to someone becoming involved in a cult. That's all true. Therefore, it's important to recognize that anyone, regardless of their background, could potentially be affected by the influence of a cult. Malignant narcissists turn their home into a cult by exhibiting characteristics typical of all cult leaders. This includes demanding complete obedience, feeling entitled to adulation and special treatment, isolating family members, enforcing discipline, using coercive control methods, and alternating between idealizing, devaluing, and discarding their victims. Education is a crucial tool for protecting oneself and avoid being drawn into a cult environment. Education plays a significant role in equipping individuals with the understanding and critical thinking skills necessary to protect themselves from the potential dangers of cult involvement, whether that is an organizational cult like NXIVM or within their own home. Wisely said, Dr. Christine Louis de Cannonville. You guys should check her work out. I'm actually going to put the link in the show notes. An amazing, amazing woman. I've grown to really love her. She's a dear friend. So then the other thing I was thinking, and I think this is more the topic of this particular podcast episode, is, I post these short excerpts of my podcasts on social media. They're anywhere from 30 to 45 to maybe 55 seconds long. And people sometimes maybe don't realize it's part of a larger podcast, so they react to that 30, 40, 55 seconds, in all kinds of ways. Like that's all I'm saying. And one of the things I've noticed is that people try to pin me down to specific things happening in the world. Like one of the things I posted recently, they say, yeah, the Israelis are assholes, or yeah, the Palestinians are assholes, or something. They're trying to get me to agree with them. And they're trying to say, well, do you think this is bad? Or do you think this is good? And I'm like, yeah, first of all, fuckers, that is cult mentality right there. What you're doing right there is you're doing what happens in a cult. So knock that shit off. But if I'm going to be clear, do I think that, rape, pillage, and murder is bad? Fuck yeah, I think it's bad. Do I think carpet bombing is bad? Yeah, it's fucking bad. So it's interesting to me because my position, which is, I think it's really bad to murder and rape and pillage and carpet bomb people, is almost controversial. Like, oh, you've taken a side. No, I fucking haven't. I've taken a human side. That's what I've fucking taken. So I know there's a bunch of you. You want me to talk about, in America, this political party or that political party or these conspiracy theories or this or that. And there's a reason that I don't want to, and it's not fear. It's that I recognized how I woke up. And when Bonnie worked on waking me up, she worked with a cult exit counselor, and the counselor said, don't mention the cult leader. Do not do that. He will shut down, clam up, and you will get nowhere. You have to talk about the pattern and process of things. And given enough time and enough information, if he can really analyze the patterns, he may start to see that the very pattern you're presenting him and showing him is what Raniere is doing. And that's exactly what happened. What's happening right now in the world is everybody's saying like, oh, this fucking guy and that fucking guy. And everyone's like, yeah, nobody's fucking seeing anything. They don't see a pattern. There are a number of cult shows that have come out, and one cult show in particular approached me about being in the show. And, I had a chat with them and I asked them, well, which cults are they going to talk to? And they told me, and I go, yeah, I think there's a problem here. And it's interesting because, when it comes to ratings, my problem is not a problem. What they want for ratings is the most salacious, fucked up shit you can imagine, because people, for some weird reason, love watching that shit. The more fucked up it is, they're like, this is amazing. I mean, these people are fucking stupid. I would never do that shit, And so the problem is, when you choose cults to analyze that truly are fucking weird and fucked up, you miss the pattern completely. And the thing that's so important is the on-ramp, is the love bombing phase, the idealization. You don't get invited into, we're going to take Kool-Aid and die. You don't get invited into that. You guys know I've said on television, nobody joins a cult. They join a good thing. And what I mean by a good thing is, you're not joining a good thing. You're actually joining a bad thing. You join what you think is a good thing based on good values. So what happens is when you don't show the subtleties of these things, it's easy for people to miss how it happens. And they think, well, I would never get into something if they wore those funny robes, or I would never get into something if we were told to drink this or drink that. Yeah, but that's not what you're told at first. You're part of this, incredible environment with these amazing people. And so I think patterns are some of the most important things to understand. Now, this is all leading somewhere. I've noticed that some people come out of cults and they become cult experts. Maybe they write books, they have podcasts, and like in my case, just way back, I left Christianity and I was very upset at Christianity and I joined another group. And this group railed against Christianity and they said, well, the Christians are full of shit. And I'm like, yeah, they're full of shit. And so I became part of this group, which was anti-Christian. And then finally realized quite a while later, like I am doing the same shit that I am saying the Christians are doing and that I was doing. I'm just proselytizing now in a different group, vilifying another group of people. And I thought that's so interesting that, I moved from group to group to group, vilifying another group of people. And the reason was because I'd never deprogrammed. I'd never seen the pattern. So back to the people that leave cults. There's some people who leave cults, and now what they do is they leave this little insular thing they were involved in, and now they embrace the mainstream narrative. Now they embrace, what everybody's generally saying, and they take that on as sort of their new kind of ideology, a way of being. So now they vilify and ridicule anybody else who's on the fringes. And they can be quite mean about it. There have been podcast episodes dedicated just to me, just to my exploration of things in my life. I'm somebody who's all fucked up and I'm this and I'm that and I can't think straight and whatever. And I thought, wow, that's really incredible. I'm a person that left a cult trying to figure shit out. And now I have people that have left a cult and now they're vilifying people that have left a cult because they're not doing it the right way. Like there's a right way to do this and it's based on the mainstream narrative. Whatever's said in the mainstream is now true and everything else is bullshit. And what I began to realize is that, there's different categories of people that leave cults, who become public figures. Some of them never woke up. Some of them, the cult collapsed underneath them. So they never went through the process of actually defragging and waking up. The cult was not there anymore, and then they began to make sense of it. For me, the true wake up is when the cult is very, very strong and you have your quote unquote come to Jesus. That's a different thing. But what I find sad is that some of the cult experts are behaving quite viciously towards other people that don't believe the same things they believe. And I think they might be missing that they're doing the same shit again. The shit they left, the shit they said was bad, they're now doing it again because I don't think they've truly understood the pattern. I think that they have embraced, and you guys have heard me talk about this, they've embraced like whatever the news says about the other people, they've embraced that. And now they will get on, social media and just rail on other people in other political parties that they think are fucking idiots. And it's interesting because if you had a rational conversation with them and said, do you think the best thing to do is to attack the other 50% of the country and call them idiots? Do you think that's the best way to resolve it? And if they don't realize what you're saying, they may say, well, that's not good. You have to come to common ground of some kind. But then if you get close to what they actually believe and who the other people are, they go, well, no, wait. These 150 million people are fucking idiots. They're horrible, Nazis. And I'm like, really? 150 million? Really? Is that true? Or is that just what you believe from the magic box that you watch at night? So I find this very, very interesting. This vilification from experts of others and the sort of otherizing that they're doing, which they talk about in their books. In their books, they say us and theming is bad. And then they do the us and theming. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I realized it's because they haven't truly seen the pattern. So why do I not talk about specific political parties? Why do I not talk about specific events sometimes? Because the slippery slope into the ideological trenches is so very, very slippery. And once you slip into an ideological trench on one side, you have no access to another way of thinking anymore. That's all you believe. And you believe that you are good and you are righteous and that the other people are fucking animals. That's very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. So what I try to do as much as possible is I try and talk about the patterns of these things, the patterns of these behaviors. And I know sometimes I get close to people's ideologies, but I'm never referencing them directly or on purpose, because what I want people to do is I want people to think. There's this belief that, look, we're good and they're bad. And you hear me talking about this in pretty much every episode. It is possible that some of what we're doing is not good, but we're so entranced from the magic box that we watch, at night. And the magic box could be the television, or it could be social media. It could be the news we're watching. We're so entranced by it that we believe that is reality. And I'm telling you, as somebody that was a news cameraman, it's not reality. It's a curated set of data points that you are being presented to nudge you in a certain direction. Do you know that there are things called like nudge units that use psychology to nudge people, to nudge a population in a certain direction, not based on what's actually true, based on what they're asked to do by their governments or whoever could be above the governments. There are psychologists, and it blows my mind, that work for governments to nudge people in a particular direction. And maybe the way they make sense of it in their mind is, well, this is for everybody's good. But remember, all the terrible things that happened in history usually were happening because somebody believed, or a group of people believed, well, this is for our own good, or this is for their own good. And that's what you end up with genocide. It's very, very scary. So I think there's great concern for me when I see people that have a righteous mission. I had a righteous mission a number of different times, and that righteous mission changed. And I'm very wary now, of that. And so just to go back to the trenches, I talked about in one podcast episode, when you're deep down a trench, like think of trench warfare, when you're deep down a trench, you can't see anything. You can't see the other people. You're just being told who they are and that your job is to vilify them or kill them or whatever it is. I think it's better to, and this is a metaphorical thing I'm about to say, to get out of the trench, and I don't mean this literally because you'll get your head shot off, to metaphorically get out of the trench and kind of float above the battlefield and look at the pattern. You will find probably that both sides are doing identical things. And if you can pull back far enough and go like, oh, they're both doing the same pattern, and then pull back even further, are multiple countries doing the same pattern? Are multiple populations believing what they're told doing the same pattern? And that's why I always say, when it comes to narcissistic abuse as well, you have to see the pattern. You can't just think, oh, narcissistic abuse only occurs in romantic relationships or marriages. No, it occurs in families. It occurs in corporations, small businesses, large businesses. It occurs in groups. It occurs in religions. It occurs in cults. It occurs in political organizations. It occurs in NGOs. It occurs in God knows what, all the way up to entire countries. It's exactly the same pattern every time. And so for those of you that are trying to get me to name certain countries or name certain groups or name certain political leaders, I understand why you're doing that, but I'm not going there because I think it's far more valuable to understand patterns of oppression, patterns of coercion, because if you stop identifying yourself with your group and hating the other group so much and just look at who is doing coercion, you will probably find your side is doing it and their side is doing it. And that's a problem because then both sides are going to go to their grave trying to destroy the other for being coercive when both are being coercive. Does that make sense? I really hope it does. This is a burning thing for me because I think there's far more value in understanding the pattern than getting upset about another group and then rallying other people to get upset and then going on social media and trying to get people to agree with you. And if they don't say exactly what you say, then you call them an anti-whatever, and now you vilify them and destroy their lives because they didn't say what you wanted. It's sort of like the witch trials, it's very fucked up. Do you accept the Lord Jesus Christ and Savior into your heart, blah, 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 blah. And if you don't say exactly what they want, you're fucked. The witch trials were slightly different. What was it in the witch trials? If you got drowned and you survived, you were a witch. But if you drowned, you weren't a witch. Yeah, you're fucked either way. So I don't like to engage in those kinds of social media questions. So just so people understand, to me, the pattern is everything. If you understand the pattern, you don't go into another relationship or another group or another cult because you've seen the pattern so clearly. You have to get past, well, the last group I was in, they wore white robes and this group is green robes, so it's entirely different. No, it's fucking not. You need to go a little deeper than that. Anyway, you guys can tell I'm all worked up about it. Also, I've been in bed for a while and I've been, hacking along for quite a while. So this is my first opportunity to get back in the game and express a bunch of things that have been in my mind. So I leave you with one question. And I think I want to do a podcast episode about this. This information control that I talk about, where people are being convinced that the other side is awful and our side is good. What do you suppose the solution is to that? What is the solution to that kind of information control? I'd love to hear your thoughts. For those of you that listen to me on podcast platforms, please do me a favor. Give me 5 stars if you think it's warranted. Give me a good review on YouTube. Subscribe. Comment wherever you are. Comment if you're on YouTube. Comment. Give me an answer to that question. What do we do about the information control problem? How do we solve it? And then for everybody else who's just on podcast platforms, the best place to really interact with me and reach me is on Instagram. That is where I spend most of my time. So that's my question. What do we do about this information control problem? What is the antidote to this us and theming that's being inflamed with information control? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay curious.